Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Country Education Partnership Free Professional Development Winter Series. My name is Brendan Bryan. The Country Education Partnership acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which our schools, our families, our communities work and play. We pay our respects to elders of the past, the present, and those that will lead us into the collective future. So welcome this afternoon to the fourth in the Winter Professional Development Series. Today's topic is retention of staff. As usual, the program will take exactly 1 hour, so we will conclude at 5 o'clock. The session is being recorded, so you will have the opportunity to review the session at your leisure during the coming week. And I make the point that all sessions that we've conducted this year are available online. At the conclusion of each session, we have a survey to have completed, and we'd ask everybody to complete that survey before signing off from the session. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our program manager, Morris Billy, who will facilitate today's session and introduce our guests. Over to you, Morris.
Thanks, Brendan, and welcome everybody, and really looking forward to this afternoon's session as we talk about one of the really hot topics in education at the moment here in Australia, and I'm guessing right around the world, which is the retention of staff. And our focus today is on the retention of staff with a focus on rural and remote areas in our country. We've got a great selection of people to speak on this topic today. We are actually going all around the world. We've got another international guest with us today who I think is up quite early in her part of the world. But a little later on, we're going to hear from a couple of our pre-service teachers. We've got Finn and Freya joining us to talk about their experiences as pre-service teachers in a rural setting. And we're also going to be hearing a bit about the work of ACMI, the Australian Centre for Moving Image in Victoria, which does some amazing work and has some wonderful opportunities for particularly teaching staff, but also the whole school community in terms of what they offer and how it's accessible. So we'll be hearing about that a little bit later on. But first of all, we're very excited to have Dr. Rebecca Morris, who I think is more affectionately known as Becky. She's an associate professor with the Department of Education Studies at the University of Warwick in Coventry in the UK. Up bright and early over there, I'm guessing. My little bit of research as we introduce Becky to talk about her particular area is that the University of Warwick is, I think, rated number 69 in the world as far as universities go at the latest information that I found, and number 10 in the UK, so which is very high praise. And fully aware that a lot of the research that they do, of which Becky's part of, is assessed as being world leading and is of the highest quality. So we're very fortunate to have Becky with us today. So without further ado, I might introduce officially Dr. Rebecca Morris to join us and share some of her findings and some of her research. Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you so much, Morris. It's really great to be here, and yeah, thank you to the whole team who've kind of supported this to happen. I'm just going to attempt to share my slides, and hopefully they will appear. Oh, they've disappeared from the section. There we go. Hang on. Apologies. Okay, I think they're there. Can everybody see my slides? Is that
all good?
Is that okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. I can't see much from this end. So yeah, thank you so much for having me at this session. It's really great to be in touch with your organisation and to have the opportunity to share some findings from the research we've been doing, but also just to reflect a little bit more widely, I think, on the topic of teacher retention, which, as you alluded to, Morris, is so significant, both in Australia, our findings are suggesting, and the work of others as well, but also around the world as well. So yeah, as Morris said, my name's Becky Morris. I work at the University of Warwick, and really happy to be here for the winter series. It was quite interesting writing the word winter series because it's about 32 degrees here. Well, it's going to be about 32 degrees here today. So a pretty warm one, but yeah. This is the project team who I just briefly wanted to introduce. The work I'm going to talk about is absolutely not a solo project. It's kind of related to a number of and a program of longer term work around teacher recruitment and retention around the world. It is led by my colleague, Professor Bengpat Si, who is currently at the University of Birmingham and working alongside other colleagues there, Stephen, Mark and Yi as well. So very grateful to them and to be part of their team and the work that we're doing. I think I've got about 15 to 20 minutes today just to share some of what we've been up to, some of our findings and thoughts, and also to think about some next steps and potential areas for discussion. And hopefully this will feed into some of the things that other speakers at the session are looking at as well and referring to. And it's great to hear that we've got some pre-service teachers here who might be reflecting on some of these areas as well. So just a little bit of background around our study and what we've been doing. It won't be a great surprise to anyone here that teacher supply is an international concern. It is something that is and has been worrying governments and societies and schools for a long time in various countries around the world. Not every country, it should be said, of course, but in a significant number of countries, and particularly in the Anglosphere, the US, England, wider UK, Australia. There have been real issues with teacher supply, both in relation to recruitment and retention in recent decades. And we know that this is important because, of course, we know what a fundamental role teachers play for students' education. We know that teachers, can be one of the most significant differences in terms of young people's outcomes. And yet in Europe, we have a situation where there is more than 80% of countries experiencing some kind of shortage. And in Australia, we see from recent research, academic and media reports of significant and growing shortages in the country as well. We know that there can be more acute problems found in specific subject areas, phases, geographical regions and types of school as well. So examples from the UK are that finding physics and maths teachers or modern languages teachers is extremely difficult at the moment. There is more of a challenge in the secondary sector, so 11 through to 16 age, whereas the primary is not so badly affected.
Becky, just wanted to, sorry, can I just say,
Yep.
I don't think your slides are moving, so we're still on the first one, so I just wanted to double check that you...
I'm moving them now. Is that working?
No, we're still on the first one. That's what I can see, understanding the complexity. So, yeah,
right.
I thought,
just
wanted to let you know.
No, thank you. I'll try and stop sharing and see if we can do that again. I'm really sorry.
No, that's okay.
Let's have another go. The joys of technology and new platforms. Okay. Is that any better?
We're on the study slide now. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, right, we'll try again. Sincere apologies for that. Okay, so yeah, just to finish off that previous slide that we were on. So yes, we know there's more acute problems in some areas, and we also have heard lots of calls from international organisations calling for this issue to be urgently addressed. And people have been trying to do things. Governments have been coming up with new policies, but there is little that is making a significant difference. And in some countries, the situation is getting worse. I'm hoping that slide has moved on, but please tell me if not. So we should be on the study one now. So yeah, our project is an ESRC funded international examination of teacher supply around the world. So funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. And it's following on from our UK focused study, which took place a few years ago, where we were trying to identify what are the key determinants or the key factors associated with teacher shortage and supply, what causes these issues, but also what are the things, the policy levers, the mechanisms, the approaches that can be used to help us tackle these shortages, and really thinking about that on a range of levels. So looking down to kind of school level and what happens within schools and with individuals, right through to kind of local organisations and local areas, regional settings, and through to more national policy contexts as well. Okay, and is it going to move? Apologies, my slides are not moving now. Okay, so our approaches for the study in terms of collecting data have been sort of very mixed methods. So this is quite a large scale study with quite a lot of reach. So we've been drawing particularly on large scale secondary data analysis. So using huge international surveys such as the TALIS survey, PISA data, also complementing that with systematic reviews of the literature to try and understand, again, what research has already been done, what do we know, and then sort of delving a little bit more deeply into particular countries that we've selected, which may be of interest for various reasons. Perhaps they have significant teacher shortages, and we want to understand why that is, or perhaps there are particular approaches or policies that have been implemented that appear to be making some difference in relation to teacher recruitment and retention as well. And through these, we've been conducting interviews with colleagues around the world, which has been fantastic, and also looking really closely at the documentary and policy work that has been happening in those countries as well.
Sorry, so, Becky, the slides aren't moving still. Sorry.
Oh, Becky, not moving. If you prefer.
Yeah, I think that might be easier. I'm not quite sure what's happened. Would you mind?
No worries.
Going to hold things up. Thank you.
That's
okay. Thanks, Maddie.
Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, so if we go on to slide 7, and that's it. Yeah, you can pop all of those up, Maddie, if that's easy. Thank you. Okay, yeah, great. So just some initial findings from an international review, and very happy to share this if anyone wants to read the full review. It is out there. It's quite lengthy. So just to kind of boil it down into a bit of a nutshell. So with this review, we looked at, or we tried to capture as much of the research around the world as possible about initiatives that are used to improve teacher recruitment or retention. The vast majority of studies that we located and focused on financial incentives. So this is the kind of main policy lever that governments are using to try and attract people into teaching, but also to try and keep them in teaching as well. And these include things like bursaries, scholarships, golden hellos, as they're known in the UK, and other types of financial support. So ways of giving money to trainees to incentivize them to become teachers, but also perhaps financial support for more experienced teachers to try and retain them in the system as well. These financial incentives, the evidence is fairly mixed, but they look promising in some ways for attracting new teachers into the role. So the evidence suggests that these can be helpful in certain circumstances for getting more people to consider coming into teaching. But this is not consistent across all entrants to the profession. So there is variation there in terms of how attractive they are to men versus women, or candidates of different ages. And they sometimes only appear to work when they have kind of tie-ins as part of the policy, i.e. where teachers are required to enter a teaching role as a condition of financial support. So they're sort of tied in to staying in the system. So it's sort of hard to know then whether how much it's the incentive that's encouraging people, or whether it's the sort of feeling that they've got to stay because they've agreed to that. We also found that the incentives need to be pretty substantial in order to compensate for the perceived challenges of teaching and the opportunities for other career options. So just offering prospective teachers a small amount of money isn't, according to the evidence, going to make much of a difference. It needs to be fairly substantial. And I mean, we've seen governments, the UK, for example, are offering really substantial bursaries for science teachers, for languages teachers at the moment. In that particular context though, and right now, it doesn't seem to have made a huge difference in terms of recruitment into the system. In terms of retention though, which is sort of what we're focusing on today, we found that financial incentives are much less useful. So yeah, the evidence, which is mainly coming from the US, we have to note that, is suggesting that, you know, people aren't necessarily going to stay just because they're being offered a few $1,000s to kind of stay for a certain number of years or to work in a particular kind of school. That's not necessarily going to make the difference. And what is suggested, but again, there just isn't much in the way of really, really strong causal evidence out there, is that it might be more fruitful to look at other non-financial approaches there. So there's real suggestions that, you know, mentoring, strong leadership and supportive leadership, great professional development opportunities, being given autonomy in the work they do, may be much more likely to support and improve retention. And that in many ways feels sort of like common sense, I guess. But again, we would really like to see more of the evidence around to support that, or to help us understand that in more depth. Thanks, Maddie. We'll move on to the next slide. Okay, yeah, so just briefly to say on the in-depth country case studies. So we've talked about, we're looking at 10 in total. The four nations of the UK we have looked at individually because they're very different contexts, and education is devolved here in the UK, so that the Welsh, Scottish and Northern Irish governments run their own education systems and have very different contexts in terms of teacher recruitment and retention. Australia is one of our case studies, which has been fantastic. And we've also been looking at a number of the Scandinavian nations, and Taiwan, China, Singapore, and some others too. We're in the process of kind of analysing all that data at the moment and writing it up, but that will be available to share at some point soon. Thanks, Maddie. Just move on to the next one. Okay, and in terms of those case studies, the kinds of things that we've been looking at to try and understand these differences in recruitment and retention are here. I'm not necessarily going to read through them all, but you can see, you know, there's a lot of factors coming through, and this is fed through from our earlier work in this area, where teacher supply is very much about sort of what is happening in schools, but there are also other factors to consider as well. So the population and changes in population and pupil numbers, for example, is hugely significant and can have a very important impact on the number of teachers that are needed, particularly in certain areas and regions. And then we've looked at, you know, the ranges of routes into teaching, the variation between phases and subjects, and the other issues that are there on that list, and also connecting with some of the evidence that we haven't found from the earlier systematic review that I mentioned in relation to sort of working conditions and environment, and you know, what teachers are looking for to try and make them stay. Thanks, Maddie. Okay, so just in some of our work around Australia, and I thought it'd be quite interesting to share this graph. So we've been looking at a lot of the existing literature and some of the policy work, and this really interesting piece of work conducted by Fiona Longmuir and colleagues at Monash is a large survey around Australian teachers' perceptions of their work in 2022. So fairly recent, although the authors obviously acknowledge that the work was happening after a very challenging kind of couple of years with the pandemic. But they asked a question around, you know, whether teachers intended to remain in the profession, and this was all the teachers in the survey, not just kind of brand new teachers. The sample was around 5,500 people, so a fairly strong sample, and you can see here that there's quite a bit of variation in terms of the percentages of teachers planning to stay. About 11% are saying they're going to stay for just another year, about 20% for about 5 years, and then they're planning to go. And we've got about 27.6% saying, I don't plan to leave until retirement. So just over a quarter are suggesting that they will stay for the rest of their careers in teaching. And then a number of unsures or don't knows, and it's worth picking up the other category, I think, because 18.7% is, you know, nearly a fifth of the people here, and those were people that have already decided to leave, so they are sort of on the way out, or they are kind of saying that they're staying if something happens, so if the conditions improve in their school, or if they get offered a pay rise next year. So again, both the others and the unsures feel fairly uncertain, and I guess the point of the graph is to highlight that this isn't you know, this isn't a stable situation. It's very similar to what we see in England as well, and that teachers, you know, don't necessarily always consider teaching as a career for life, which seems different to perhaps what we've seen in the past. Thanks, Maddie. Thank you. And yeah, you can just pop up those. So should we care about retention? I mean, no surprises that yes, of course, I think we should. And you know, the work that I've been doing with my team indicates that this is hugely important. And as we'll see in a moment, it feels, particularly in recent years, that there has been a really, really significant focus on recruitment, and perhaps in some ways retention has been left behind. And perhaps those fantastic experienced teachers that are in the system doing the job every day aren't necessarily being recognised and supported to stay and develop within the systems as much as could be done. Why should we care about retention? Well, I think it matters on a number of levels. So, of course, for individual teachers who are going into schools and going into teaching, they want a career that is going to be fulfilling, that is going to personally and professionally support and develop them, that provides job satisfaction, you know, that allows them to develop expertise and support with career and salary progression and opportunities. Of course, teaching is a job. We get paid a salary. That's really important. But also, you know, teachers want generally, our research shows, to go into it for other reasons as well, and to support the lives of young people that they're working with. And for those young people, without enough high quality teachers, their academic and other outcomes can be, you know, significantly affected. We also, you know that teachers can play a much wider role in young people's life chances and their experiences of learning and school more generally. And that stuff is really, really important. We know, of course, for schools that if they're suffering with retention or high teacher turnover, that can have knock-on effects on other teachers, on their workload, feelings of pressure and stress, on the environment they're working in. But there are also substantial turnover costs as well, if we're thinking about it from an economic perspective, having to kind of, you know, train, hire, bring in new teachers quite regularly can be really costly and also very challenging. And then more widely in terms of society, of course, you know, we want a society where there are enough teachers. We know that, you know, levels of education can impact on skills and knowledge development, the economy, and of course education is a pathway to individual and societal flourishing, and so having enough high quality teachers to support with that is really important. Next slide, please, Maddie. Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of pause for a second here. I mean, we won't sort of stop the talk or anything, but it just might be helpful to kind of have a think about this. If you are kind of coming in as a relatively new teacher, presumably you're hoping to maybe stay in teaching for some time. But what would help with that? What are the kinds of things that people or organisations or governments can do to help retain teachers? What would be significant and important to you? And also, I think it's really important to consider, and we found this from our discussions with school leaders and teachers, what can individuals do to contribute to a profession where people want to stay, not where they feel necessarily compelled to stay or where they're being paid to stay, but where they really want to be working in that particular environment. Okay, and we'll just move on to the last couple of slides. So I thought I'd finish with some excerpts from some of the interviews we've been doing, which connect with this issue of retention. The first one here, and I'll allow you to just sort of read it on the screen rather than me reading it out loud, but touches upon the issue of retention being really important and us not just focusing on recruitment, but again, alluding to this idea of, it's not a cheap thing to train teachers. It's a significant investment for society to do that, and it's a really important investment. But you can't just use them up at 7 years and burn them out. And that's come through from a number of our interviews about how teachers are treated. The second one there from a Welsh teacher educator presents a slightly different story. There's much less of a retention issue in Wales, and they noted that teachers stay put, and they mentioned that that's because of the other opportunities available in Wales are perhaps less easy to access for some people, and so teachers don't tend to jump ship. Also, perhaps because it's considered a well-paid profession there and still has good standing. So this issue of status has come through quite significantly as well. Next slide, please, Maddie. And then, yes, just to finish up with a couple of quotes from colleagues in Australia that we've spoken to again, and I just wanted to kind of show that the echoes here between UK settings and Australia. So again, there's retention issues as well, this first participant says, where private schools don't see the kinds of challenges of retention. So this contrast between different schools seems quite important, and different areas across countries. And the second participant there, looking at the underemphasis on retention. This was really reiterated in the Australian interviews a number of times. People felt that the government had significantly focused on recruitment with much less interest in retention at present. So that's something we're hoping to follow up on further. And these colleagues were really interested in, are we losing particular groups of people from the profession? And if so, who and why? And they felt that more work needs to be done to explore that. Okay. And then just a couple of bits there about what's next. So more research, of course, identifying some promising approaches, and we'll be connecting that further. We're doing a lot of work with practitioners, teachers and leaders in schools, and also with policymakers as well. And I think that is it. Let's just see. Yes, the final slide. Thank you so much, Maddie, for sharing those. So always happy to hear from people if you'd like to know any more about the research, and we can share working papers and publications as well, if that's helpful. But I will pause there. Thank you. Sincere apologies about the technology as well from my end.
Becky, that's absolutely fine. Thank you for that. Just a quick question, if you've got a minute there. I was looking at I think the quote, the Welsh quote, stuck out for me because it sort of matches some of the stuff I've been reading from Scandinavian countries about, that it's not an issue there either in terms of the retention and the status of teachers and perhaps the opportunities. But I know we started talking about a decade ago about, younger people coming into their professional life were likely to change careers as they went on. So we were moving into a new phase. And your data about 26% who are going to stay potentially till the end. I just wondered, have you seen or heard anything about whether that relates to other industries? Is it fairly similar, or is the teacher situation quite stark in that space compared to what they're facing in other industries?
That's a really interesting question, actually, Maurice. Yeah, I'm not so sure about other industries, but you're right, because there has been that kind of shift away from an idea of a career for life. So it might be that we expect that, and I think for teachers as well now, they sort of, they realize that they have so many skills, and so there are so many other opportunities in jobs that they can move into if they do decide to kind of leave school-based settings. Sort of anecdotally, I've been talking with some colleagues doing work around social work, and they've seen similar, that a proportion of people will stay and kind of carry on and do the job for a long time, but a lot of others, kind of do 5, 6, 7 years and then look to other opportunities. Again, they were talking about reasons connected with sort of burnout and stress and things there. But yeah, it'd be interesting to explore that more widely in relation to other professions. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's probably a space that we continue to have to play catch up in with some of the stuff we've heard before. And now we're sort of at the pointy end, and it's a real challenge. But thank you for that. Very, very interesting, and some really great data there and some really good information. And I think it lends us to move into the space where we've got a couple of our pre-service teachers who are with us today, who might be able to, I guess, agree with a lot of the stuff that you were talking about and perhaps give their perspective. And I might just go to Finn Pedersen first, because he's in the middle of my screen. Finn's currently is at Beechworth Secondary College, if I have that correct, Finn. And
yeah, that's correct.
Based on what, and welcome, and based on what you just heard, I'm wondering if you'd like to just give us, from your perspective, about when you were looking at moving into this space, what were the sort of things that you were looking for and that attracted you to go into a rural space and potentially stay there?
Well, I was in Melbourne the other day, and I was walking through Southern Cross Station, and there was a bin overflowing with KFC rubbish. And I thought, oh, I can't wait to get back on the train again and get up to Beechworth, where in the middle of town there's a creek with trout in it. And I think that kind of lends itself to the idea that out here in the country compared to the city is I think fundamentally a better lifestyle, one where you're more connected to the community around you, where you're more connected to the school, because the school is usually smaller. I mean, we only have 260 kids at Beechworth Secondary College, about 30 odd staff. And I can go up to each and every staff member and talk to them about their day, what they did on the weekend, or any kid at the school. And it really creates this sense of fulfillment every day, whether it's a tough day in the classroom, doesn't matter, because you can still always have a cup of tea with someone in the staff room and have a chat about it. And I think it's, for me, for someone who grew up in the city but had links to the country, that was something that I felt you're missing in the city more often than not. And moving up here has really cemented the idea that your work as a teacher is very much community-based. And I feel like it's a privilege to be able to go outside of school and watch the kids play local footy on a Saturday, or see their parents at the pub and have a quick yarn about how they're going. And that all lends itself to that idea that teaching is a fulfilling career, even though it feels like sometimes you're a C-grade politician in a country town.
And what do you look for in a rural school? What separates them when you're looking at them that attracts you? What are you looking for when you're doing that sort of work?
I think there is an emphasis here on the idea that anyone can teach at a private school. Anyone can teach, especially at a private school in the city. But the kids out here, they need us. A little bit like the public health system, or a little bit like doctors and nurses in the NHS in the UK, where two of my brothers live. I think, well, it is about that idea that you're in a small town, and in a town that needs you. And that's quite fulfilling and something that drives me every day.
And based on what you heard from Becky before and your own experience, when you think ahead, what are the sort of factors do you think you're looking for in choosing to stay in a rural community long term? What would be some of the things that you think would be important?
Well, outside of school, definitely house prices are lower here, and so that you can more easily, get to the idea of the Australian dream, to put it like that. You can buy a house more easily. Lifestyle here is more relaxed. I can jump on my bike and get out in nature very quickly. And so that all lends itself to a fulfilling career, but a fulfilling life over my career, which is something that I think you need, because you need a bit of a balance between school and home, and especially a small country school where a lot of these kids come from disadvantaged families, and they can be tough to teach. So, but if you can get out onto a bike, or you can get out onto a kayak and go onto the water, it's such a great way of relaxing, turning off, and re-educating yourself, and having that time to reflect on what's important.
And I think that point you made about knowing all the teachers, knowing a lot of the parents, and knowing all the kids is a really important one. Like I'm guessing you feel like you can make a real difference in that space when you've got that really personal relationship with a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that is basically one-on-one tutoring most of the time with these kids. We had a few kids away on inter-school sports, so I had a class of 6 in front of me, and we combined the two classes, and that lends itself to a bit of professional tutorship for these kids, that they know you so well, you know them so well, and you're going to be here throughout their year 7 to 12 journey. But I think the research of what Becky's touched on is interesting as a young person, thinking, well, I didn't think about I was going to get into teaching for the rest of my career. I think that's not a norm amongst my generation. We're always thinking about, well, what can we do? What can we do next? So whether I'm going to be here forever, I don't know. But for now, I can say it's really good.
Yeah, and I think what you just said there is the experience of a lot of people, so I think you've nailed that. And just before we finish up with Finn and move to Freya, I think, Mark, you've got a quick question for Finn.
Hi, Finn.
Okay, Mark.
Just a quick one, just wondering, you're in your first year at Beechworth, and if we said, sound retention, let's say you were looking at 3 years there, what would your advice be to schools or to a rural school around actually retaining staff for the 2 to 3 years beyond their first year? Is there any sort of key things that you think they should do well?
I think off the top of my head, there's probably two things that I would be keen to know. And one of the reasons the first reason I moved out here, not the primary reason, but one of the reasons I moved out here was I think there's a greater chance to get a higher starting salary because country schools are more in need of teachers. I said to the principal, I've come from a career before this. I'm not just a graduate 21-year-old. Would you be willing to increase the starting salary? And she said yes, and here's a bonus as well. And so that little financial incentive, that can be the margin, that can be helpful on the margins. Where am I going to go to this school or that school? Also, I think there's the chance to grow in your profession quicker in a small country school. So we've got a smaller department here, so maybe there's a chance of becoming head of humanities, let's say, in a couple of years rather than waiting 10 or 15 years. And I think also if the school, what's the vibe of the school? Is it positive? And I think Beechworth Secondary is in a place where we constantly are told, and it really feels this way, that there's a good energy around the school. The community outside of school is also positive. The kids want to come to school. They're happy there. And that lends itself to all those little moments in the classroom where the kids are happy, you're happy, and we're just enjoying that great aspect of teaching, which would be a bit of play and a bit of growth.
Thanks, Finn. Fantastic to hear from you on the ground, so to speak. And another person who's on the ground is Freya Hamilton. Freya, just based on that conversation and what you heard before, what did you look for in deciding what school to apply for initially in your journey? What were the factors?
Hi, yeah. Well, I just want to preface it by saying I'm a graduate teacher who's just finished mid-year, so I'm not yet in a teaching role. However, I did decide to do my placement early, and that was due to a bunch of factors, but similarly to what has been already covered by Finn and Becky about community. My first two placements were both in inner city schools, and they were very, very busy schools. There was a lot going on, and I have ties to the country. Both my parents are from the country, so I was like, well, I'll give it a go. I'll try something new. Yeah, and I've also found similarly like the community vibe in a country school is just wonderful. Yeah.
Was it when you applied and you obviously wanted to go rural and you were there, was it what you thought it would be? Was there anything that surprised you or that made you really happy and excited that you weren't expecting, sort of thing?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting actually the school that I was at to be so big. I ended up in Bairnsdale at a school with 500 students for a primary school. So I had never been at a school that big. In the grade 2 team, there was 4 teachers, and the way that the school ran was like very different to how I'd usually taught in a smaller team. So I was quite amazed at how big a country school could be. Yeah, but also what did align with my expectations was the community part. Like Finn was saying, like even in the mornings, I would go and get my morning cup of coffee before school, and the barista was actually the father of one of my students. So it was just really nice. You can always talk to the kids, and then you leave school and you see them again in the supermarket. So it was awesome.
Yeah, never get on the wrong side of your barista is my advice. So I think you've done the right thing there, and keep that relationship very tight. Just based on what Mark
Definitely.
what Mark asked Finn before about, what do you think are the factors that if you were to consider staying in a rural area, medium to long term, what do you think some of those factors could be that would support you or help you in that situation, particularly in a rural setting?
Well, the first thing, I absolutely agree with Finn that I think the lifestyle in a rural setting is just it's very appealing with the housing prices and yeah, the community life. Like I got to join a couple of community groups while I was in Bairnsdale, and just yeah, it feels very homely, and everyone can always give a lot of advice of things to do after school, whether that is going for a walk around the river or yeah, going kayaking down the road. So yeah, I'd say community spirit and having a bit of space, a bit of land would definitely be one of the reasons. But secondly, also the I guess like the vibe of the staff when you go into the staff room and some of the other staff have children in your class, or they are families with someone else in the staff room. It's it created a really nice vibe where you could talk to anybody. So I think, yeah, and it's just a very positive attitude towards being and getting better and continuing, because we had a few staff members change over during my period, but the assistant principal was there and like always happy to help, and I just hadn't seen that kind of everybody heading towards let's keep going, let's keep it positive. I hadn't seen that in my other placements, so I was pretty impressed and wanted to stay at the school really badly.
That's really interesting, because there's a theme underlying what you're saying, Freya, and what Finn said, and tying in with what Becky was saying about there's some emphasis on incentives and providing that, but it doesn't seem to be the major factor. The factor of connection, people, culture, being welcome, underpins everything that you guys have said about your experience, and yet it probably doesn't is not number one when we talk about recruitment and retention. It seems to come down that list under those other things. So perhaps, Becky, there's a bit of on the run research happening right here and now as we're going forward. Probably not something we didn't unexpected, but it's good to hear those stories, that it still comes down to people, places, connections, communication, relationships, trust, all those basic things that we need to get right before we do all the other stuff. So on that note, unless there's any other questions, Mark, did you have any follow-up questions? I think you're sitting there on the balcony somewhere in Darwin looking refreshed and relaxed, but did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
Freya, probably similar question. If you had to give advice to a principal of a rural school about how do you keep teachers, how do you keep a first year teacher there in year 2 or 3, is there a couple of things you'd obviously you've indicated about the culture, but sometimes it's a hard conversation to have. Is there any other sort of key things you might pass on if they happen to ask you?
That's pretty tough. Yeah, mainly just about the culture. I guess the financial incentives are working on me. I've been a university student for a while, so I'm looking now at the jobs portal today, trying to find a job near me that might have a financial incentive. Just yeah, as a graduate, I think that works for me. But yeah, you're right. Down the line, a few years into the job, I think just continuing the support. I've heard that when you start in a teaching position, you often get a lot of mentoring and a lot of support from the other teachers, and then it kind of just drops off as you get more experience. But if you've always got someone to turn to, I think that would help keep the support. Like as I was saying, I could always turn to my supervising teacher and my assistant principal at the last placement, and that was fantastic. So yeah, I think always having somebody to guide you, even if you left uni 3, 4, 5 years ago, is still really valuable.
Yeah, thank you, because I think that ties in with all the other stuff we were talking about today, and also the fact that it is important, given the challenges we have in the cost of living space, that is important. You know, it underpins when we make decisions, but it is certainly not the only thing, but it is a very important factor. So I want to thank Finn and Freya for their honest and insightful reflections on their journey so far. So we want to wish both of you guys all the best going forward. Becky, thank you again for your time today and your wonderful research. I think you need to leave us because you've got to hit the road to get to work soon. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, I better get into work. But thank you so much. And just to say, Finn and Freya, I loved hearing about what you were saying around the value of community and relationships. I think that's so important, and great to hear about the context. And good luck with your careers. So, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Becky, and all the best to your English football team, Coventry, who I've had an eye on over the years, just because I had some friends who came from there a long time ago, so I'll just keep an eye on them. So all the best and have a great day at work. And just finally today, we're going to hear from Christine Everly, who's from ACMI, the Australian Centre for Moving Image, as I mentioned before, who have some wonderful incentives and information for teachers, particularly some free teacher membership stuff. So I'm really keen. I had a good look at the ACMI website today, which was absolutely fantastic and has so much wonderful stuff in the resource space for schools across the board. Totally encourage people to have a look, but I'm sure Christine will be able to tell us a lot more about that. So Christine, over to you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for asking me, and I've really enjoyed those 3 presentations. I have to say that my formative years were growing up in Warwick in the Wimmera, so I was really interested to listen to what people were saying who'd gone back. I haven't been back to Warwick for a very, very long time. So it's really nice to hear that some of the experiences I had as a little kid, you're experiencing that sort of sense of community and the friendliness and, you know, just that joy that you get from the place when you grow up in the bush. So that was really nice for me to hear that. I'm going to try sharing my screen. Let's see how we go. I think it's going to be this one. And then I'm going to, let's see, slideshow. Now, hopefully you can see my screen coming through now. Can you see Learning with ACMI?
Yep, all good, thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So I began my life as a primary teacher, and I wended my way through working in a couple of different primary schools at RMIT at Melbourne Uni in teacher education, and then I landed on my feet at a previous iteration of ACMI called Cinemedia. And my career has taken a really interesting turn throughout that period. We began with one cinema down at Treasury Theatre, and those of us who are old enough to remember the days of dragging out the projector to screen the 16mm films, that's how I started my life at Cinemedia. Now I have the most amazing program that myself and my team have developed, and I'm really excited to share that with you. But before I do forget, I'll pick up on what you said, Maurice, about the free teacher membership. All Victorian teachers are entitled to a free membership at ACMI. So I really encourage people to just jump online, find the membership page and scroll down till you find teacher membership. If you get the chance to come into ACMI in Melbourne at Federation Square, then you'll find that there's a few advantages to having that membership. One in particular at the moment is if you've got a VIT card, you can actually have a free visit to our amazing Beans exhibition, which is on until September. It's a really fun, playful, joyful exhibition, and it's a really nice way to refresh yourself if you can get down there in the school holidays. So learning at ACMI. So there's lots of things that happen at ACMI. I'm going to just very quickly introduce ACMI a little bit, give you a bit of a taste of our program, and then at the end, if there's any time left, I can answer some questions. So that's the entrance off Federation Square that you can see at the moment. One of my educators, Kate, taking some kids down these very long stairs that I almost always fall down nearly every day because they're so big. But we've had a really major redevelopment of ACMI, and this area now is really beautiful and really inviting and welcoming. And just around to the right, you can't see it, is a lovely big seating space where school kids arrive at and sit at to begin their journey into ACMI when they first come in. We are Australia's National Museum of Screen Culture, and I'm not going to go through all of that, but basically I think we all know that screens are really dominant in our lives these days. I'm really working hard with the Australian Media Literacy Alliance at the moment. I'm the co-chair, and we strongly believe that media literacy has become incredibly important. And so whilst we have lots of creative programs at ACMI, which are fun and engaging and really good at teaching kids about how moving images are created, made and engaged with by people, I think we're starting to get to the pointy end where we really need to get some heavy duty media literacy happening in schools. So we're working at trying to look at how English and the arts curriculum can lend themselves to these curriculum areas. I've pretty much said that. So we do shine a light on careers and craft. We're not just about what you see on screen. We're really interested in unpacking often the hidden careers that people don't know about and the way the craft of various different moving images works. So we tend to explore films and TV, video games, VR, AR, XR. So we're pretty focused on whatever the emerging technologies are of the time. We try to make our programs relevant to schools in that we keep the programs simple so that you can go back to school and implement with fairly basic technology. You don't have to have the state-of-the-art technology that we often have available to us at ACMI. Maurice, you mentioned our website. I just thought I'd show people what you need to do is find your way up in the menu up the top right-hand corner, the little hamburger. If you click on that, eventually you'll find schools and teachers, and you'll find under that drop-down menu a bit of an insight into the types of programs that we offer, the on-site programs in particular. And then if you keep going and you use the very dull-looking filters on the left there, if you scroll into that and look at program and resource types, that's where you will find loads and loads of online resources that are free around all sorts of topics. So it's really good to have a bit of a poke around there and see what we've got on offer. On site, we have our permanent exhibition, The Story of the Moving Image. It's a free exhibition. It's really beautiful. It was redesigned and reopened. Well, we actually closed just before the COVID lockdowns to do the redevelopment. So then we opened when the lockdowns in Melbourne stopped, and then we closed again when the lockdowns started again. And then we've opened again, and we're having a great time in this exhibition. There's lots of interactive and immersive sorts of activities in the exhibition. You can see this little fellow engaging with the shadow play interactive, and throughout the whole way through this exhibition, there's things to make and do. Our education program encompasses a lot of things. We have two beautiful classroom areas. One is sort of a very beautiful looking classroom where we do things like animation, game making, film making, bit of coding, all sorts of things. The other one is this space, which is our TV production space. This is a TV quality production space, so we can actually stream. We've actually had TV programs run out of this space. So the kids can come in and they can act on the green screen. They formulate a bit of a film together, and then they get to watch that before they go home at the end of the day. Now, I'm rushing through these on-site programs because I'm really conscious that you're all in rural and remote schools, so coming into ACMI may not be possible for you. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of an insight into the programs we run from foundation year right through. Oh, that's one of my favourite programs. I just have to always have that image. We run programs right through to tertiary level. So there's lots and lots of different things. I'm not going to go through them all in this very short time. But again, the website, if you get a chance to have a look on the website, you can find the things that might be relevant to your students. We get a lot of schools coming into Melbourne for camps who like to come in and spend a day with us and engage with either the exhibitions that are happening or with one of these sort of workshop type programs. We have film programs as well. So particularly those schools that come in for a camp program, sometimes they're just looking for something that's a little educational, but also a little bit of time where the teachers can have a cup of coffee and sit down for a little short time as well. We have loads of films that you can choose from that you can watch. We usually do a short introduction for very small kids, but a longer, for example, our VCE film programs have a 1-hour lecture after the film that helps them to unpack the sort of curriculum that they're dealing with at VCE level, particularly for English and media students. We have talk programs which talk about the way films, TV and games are created and why they're created and who creates them and who's represented within them and who's not represented within them. So lots and lots of getting into the nitty-gritty of media and how media operates in our world. But this is the bit that I really wanted to get to, because we do have lots of online programs as well. It varies throughout the year depending on who's around and who we can bring into the studios. But at the moment we have planned a few webinars, one with Nadia Weekly in August, one with a group of kids, First Nations kids from the series Dalu, which is an ACTF, Australian Children's Television Foundation TV series, so a bit behind the scenes around that TV show. A movie masters program, which is really good if you're thinking about doing some filmmaking with your kids and you want to just get a little bit of an introduction to filmmaking. It's just a short webinar to help you with that. And then the same with stop motion. If you're wanting to do some animation with your kids, just some basics and a few tricks of the trade about how to get started with stop motion animation. We've got another webinar happening soon in July after the school holidays about game making. So for those of you who are interested in working around video games in the classroom. Online also we have, this one's amazing. This is a free library of lesson plans. We've tried to create the plans in a really simple way so that they're easy for teachers to unpack. And they're written by teachers for teachers. They are cross-curriculum lesson plans. So our idea here is that we believe that games can be used for good in the classroom if they're well chosen and thoughtfully planned around. It's not just about game making, it's about drama or phys ed or various humanities. There's loads and loads of different types of lessons here that integrate games into the lesson planning. If you're interested in that and you just want to know a little bit more, there's a very short 15-minute webinar that runs in August and October on that one. And this is one of the lessons that we've just recently uploaded. It's so beautiful. This game, Paperbark, is a very gentle. I'm not a game player, but I like Paperbark and I love Goose Game, Untitled Goose Game, for anyone that knows some of those games. Really suitable for all ages. But Paperbark's beautiful. It's very painterly. It reminds me of some of those really old-fashioned paintings that used to be created that showed the wonder of nature in our bushlands. But this game is not a First Nations game, but what we did was we worked with some First Nations educators to write the game lessons to help students with their teachers to unpack finding out a little bit more about the place that they live in through the game by exploring with this little wombat, the flora and the fauna of the landscape around them. Really gentle, nice game. Lots of language in there that kids can engage with and learn about their place through games. And okay, these ones, Film It is a really, really comprehensive filmmaking toolkit. This one, if you're wanting to make films with students in your class, you could actually just go into Film It and we could start from the start and just work your way through pre-production through to post-production. The students can actually engage with this online. It's very user-friendly. It's been made to support teachers, but it's written in a way that you could actually use it with your overhead projectors, showing my age, with your digital projectors to share with students how to actually create all the different components that you need to make an effective film. We have the same sort of thing, a set of modules around games called Game Builder, which there's a very early beginning series of modules if you're just starting out with game making, and then there's another series for those who are a little bit more advanced and want to take it a little bit further. And then there's another one around scratch coding, which is again really simple for people that want to get started on a little bit of coding using Scratch. And that takes me to the end. So,
Christine, that's wonderful timing because we've just about reached the end, and that was a fantastic journey
that was a
through.
fast and dirty journey, wasn't it?
It was fantastic.
Scary.
I love what ACMI does, and I love what resources are available for schools. And you're right about rural schools, but ACMI is very accessible. They're near Flinders Street Station, and as you mentioned, schools are often in the city, around the city for camps and stuff. So a lot of things to take on board there. Like you said, I encourage people to go and have a look at the website because there's amazing stuff there. I love that curiosity underpins everything that you celebrate at ACMI. So thank you for your time today, and thank you to all our guests that spoke today, a wide variety, fantastic crew. And with that, as we wrap up, I'll hand it back to Brendan.
Thanks very much, Morris. And can I also thank all our speakers today. The survey for today's session is available in the chat box. So I would encourage everybody to complete that survey before signing off. Today is the final session in the winter series. The spring series starts in August, 28th of August, and then we have sessions on the 4th, 11th, and the 18th of September. Topics include literacy programs, impact of social media, and wellbeing issues. So I would encourage people to enrol for those programs in the spring series. And can I thank everybody that's made a contribution towards the success of our current winter series. That's all from us now. Please fill in the survey. Goodbye for now. Bye.